Welcome to Design to Move, a weekly functional movement series reviewing common movement impairment syndromes, muscle imbalances, and injury cycles and how to correct for them. Don't just exercise, but restore optimal movement. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Design to Move. My name is Ryan Maxwell. This is Ryan Parr. We're two movement specialists here with Fluid Health and Fitness. And today we're going to go over a posture distortion that has to do with an overuse of the quads. It's normally referred to as quad dominance. Essentially, this is when a muscle takes over and starts to move the body more than it should in relationship to the muscles that help support it, or otherwise known as like synergistic dominance. So unfortunately, the quads will have a tendency to become overused or stuck on because the body likes to use flexion in that area. They're a flexor of the knee and of the hip. So today we're going to show you how to reduce those. We're going to do it on one side of the body. Normally when they're on, it means that the opposite side of muscles on the other side of the body, like the gluteals, hamstrings, the extensor muscle groups, they are phasic or they don't like to engage. So we're going to show you how to activate those and bring the body back into its natural alignment. We've written a blog on the topic. It's in the description below. If you want more information, make sure to read up on it. We also have a table of contents to the side here with timestamps of all the segments that we're going to be going over with a condensed version of the video at the bottom if you just want that as a reference. And we always offer everyone a free movement evaluation or a free movement screen online virtually. And you can do that, request it by emailing us at admin@fluidhealthandfitness.com. On that, we want to get into our topic and we're going to start with our releases. This is our mobility and release segment for the video. Today we're going to target the quad and specifically the two muscles of the quad, rectus femoris, the medial quad muscle, and the vastus lateralis, the outer lateral quadricep muscle. You're going to need a foam core ball for this. So the first muscle that we're going to target is the rectus femoris. This is, again, a primary knee extensor muscle and hip flexor. So it's the muscle that extends or straightens the knee out, but it also helps to lift the hip up. Now when this guy is tight, it does tug down on the pelvis and it opens up the ribs. So in times past, we've talked about how this impacts flared ribs or again, intra-abdominal pressure being reduced because of it. So we're going to want to make sure that we think about our rib cage position and our pelvis position as we go into this release and soft tissue release drill. So Ryan's going to use this foam core ball, it's our fluid foam core ball, and he's going to get down on the table. He's going to apply the weight of his body onto the ball, basically compressing the muscle between his femur and the actual ball. Now he's supporting his upper body onto his forearms and he's drawing his right leg up and away from the body to give himself a little base of support. Now by doing that, it's going to put more pressure onto his quad. Now the ball is going to be centered right in the middle of the leg, so if he was to roll medial lateral or back and forth, he could start to feel that front muscle kind of glide over it. It'll clunk side to side as he goes into the medialis and the lateralis. You're going to be right on the middle. So once he finds the center point, he's going to again settle into us and kind of relax and hold. Once he sinks, he's going to just breathe in, just let it sit. Allow his body to kind of relax for a little bit. And then he's going to make sure that he maintains his pelvis by keeping his abdominal pressure. He's going to contract his abs. So he's going to shift his weight to his left elbow a little bit. He's going to keep his knee loaded up on the right side. And then turning the toe in on the left, he's going to contract his left glute. And then he's going to bend through the knee and pull the leg back towards his hip. At the top of that movement, he's going to breathe out, relax, and sink back down. Now, you know that you're going to only go as far in the knee bend as you can tolerate by maintaining the contraction of the glute on the same side. He's breathing in as he contracts the glute, breathes out as he lets the leg come back down. And with each cycle of flexion extension, he's going to feel that muscle start to relax and the ball should sink in deeper. Now, we would do that for about 6 to 10 sets and see if you can get the knee bent deeper and deeper each time. And then he's going to go down into another position by getting into the vastus lateralis. This is the lateral sweep. This muscle attaches to the outside portion of the kneecap and then up into the greater trochanter, the hip little junction there at the femur. So now he's just basically shifting his center of mass a little bit more over to the side, and he can even bring his right knee up a little bit more. And that's going to shift his body weight and pelvis over towards the left side. Now again, you'll roll off the rectus femoris onto the lateralis, and you can do multiple spots through that quad muscle. But again, it's the same mechanics. The weight's on the left forearm, head is oriented to the left. He's going to bend the knee, rotate the toe internally on the left side, contract the left glute, breathe in, Pull the leg up through flexion as long as he maintains the flexion of the glute, and then breathe out and relax. You're gonna contract the glute, breathe in, maintain the abdominal pressure, bend the knee until he feels the muscle want to relax on the glute, and then breathe out and sink back down. One more time, you would go through about 6 to 10 of these breathing cycles, trying to achieve more and more range of motion through the flexion of the knee, and again, making sure that you don't move the pelvis as you do this by keeping the glute contracted. That's all you need to do to release the quads, and again, the specifics, the lateral and the medial, and then we're gonna get into our activation. This is our activation segment for the video. Here's where we're gonna show you how to engage the muscles that are traditionally underactive. Now, we're not gonna directly oppose the quadricep here. We're gonna be working on the abdominals. Today, we're gonna work on the external oblique on the same hemisphere of the muscles that we reduced on that side of the body. So the muscle we're gonna activate today is the external oblique, and this is gonna be on the same hemisphere as the quads that we reduced. Now, oftentimes when the muscles of the quads or the flexors are too tight, the hip bone has a tendency to flare open or abduct, and that rotates the rib cage with it, leading to, again, an opening of the rib and, again, a reduction of the engagement of the external oblique on that side. So today, what we're gonna do is, again, try to get that guy to get more in control, hold the rib line, and by extension, the pelvis position so that we can keep that hip adducted and internally rotated on the same hemisphere. So Ryan's laying down, he's gonna bend the right knee, he's gonna focus on the left, that's where he started with the release. He's gonna contract his left glute, and by doing so, you'll notice that his hip bone goes up and in. So go ahead and relax, and then flex up and in, and you can see it rotate inward. So you're gonna try to keep that glute in engagement the entire time. Now, as we do that, we also wanna co-contract against the lat on the opposite side. Ryan's gonna push his arm into the table, or you would do it on the floor if you were doing this from home. And then he's gonna come up through the torso, supporting the head in his fingertips, lifting the torso off the table while keeping the glute contracted, and then rotate from left to right. So the left hemisphere is rotating inward. He's breathing in as he comes up, he's keeping his knee inside his hip line, and then he's gonna breathe out and slowly come down to a count of 6. This is a very important function, is the eccentric deceleration of that, again, retraction of the rib. So he's gonna come up, breathe in, rotate through, left glute contracts, right knee stays in towards the midline, and then breathe out and slowly come down to a count of 6. Now, if you struggle with this, you're gonna start to exhibit a couple different compensations. Most of us like to overuse our internal oblique on the right, so you would come up and crunch, and instead of actually pivoting, you're going to do more of a contralateral tilt. You see that all the time. Okay, number one, we don't wanna do that. We wanna make sure that you bring the rib cage towards the pelvis on the left side, so his ribs should be coming downward towards his hip before he pivots. If he releases and he starts to buckle in towards the right, then that again would be a compensation. So watch out for that at home. Also, you'll notice, like with Ryan, because of his tight glutes, he has a tendency to want to abduct the leg. So as he comes up, he tries to leverage his weight by rotating the leg outward. You want to keep that in. So he's going to use his groin, his internal oblique, to help stabilize that hemisphere before he comes up across. Couple key points. Now again, don't lift with the neck as you come up. Support the head in your fingertips. Make sure that you use a nice slow eccentric contraction. Do 2 sets of 20 repetitions with a minute in between to recover. And if you can't do it with compensation, make sure to reduce the range of motion or work up to the volume in the repetitions. And eventually over time, that rib cage will stay nice and engaged and depressed where it belongs and help to stabilize the hip so that you don't overuse the quads. On that, let's get into our next segment. This is our integration segment for the video. Here's where we show you how to engage multiple muscle groups in this series or timing that's responsible for maintaining clean and efficient movement. We want to show you how to reduce the overuse of your quads and engage your posterior chain. We're going to do that from a 4-point position into a hip extension position. Let's get started. So for integration, we're going to get Ryan to a 4-point position. It's kind of a variation of a plank. He's going to go down on his all fours. His shoulders are over his palms. So what we want to do is make sure that when we get into these positions, we protect the body and we try to get into a neutral alignment. So neutral basically means the weight distribution through the body that would protect the joints. So Ryan's head is going to be in line with his TL junction, his rib line, and then in line with his sacrum down here. So if I were to have a broom or a pole and I were to line it up, it would be one line from the head all the way down to the tailbone. Now his shoulders are stacked right over his palms, and he's going to keep his chin tucked. His hips are right over his knees, so he's got to get about a 90-degree angle through the hip, and he's going to extend his left leg behind him. Now this would resemble the mid-stance phase of gait. So it's as if he was on his left leg, he was compressed, and his right leg would be up in flexion. So it's again a gait position, and we're going to isolate the position at that mid-stance where we start to see the quad start to dominate the position of the hip. So as he extends the leg and he starts to lift the leg up, a lot of times if the quad is tight, the pelvis is going to sweep open. And we see that a lot in different exercise protocols out there, people doing certain movements that may not actually enhance their functional motion. They're trying to get their glutes to fire, they're trying to get lateral or external rotators to hit, right? But really what they're doing is they're moving through the opposite hip and maybe even through the spine, and all of which is going to create lots of injury cycles down the road. So we're going to stop that. So what he's going to do is, again, part of this integration, use that external oblique that we talked about, right? So he's going to lock that rib down by flexing down through his rib cage. He's then going to breathe in, push into his left palm, and then he's going to flex the glute on the left and lift the leg up with no out sweep, or again, abduction of the hip bone. So that pelvis or that hip bone should be parallel to the floor or to the table in this case, parallel and in line with the opposite hip bone on his right hip. He's going to bring that leg down and slowly relax the glute. So he's going to breathe in as he lifts up, pushing through the left palm, holding the rib line neutral, keeping the glute contracted, and then breathe out and slowly let the leg down. Now, if you do it right, what you will feel is a natural stretch of these quadricep muscles. If you pull too far and you hyperextend, you're going to see the back start to arch, you're going to lose the abdominal pressure, and you're going to externally rotate, all of which again lead to that excessive compensation and hypermotion in the lumbopelvic system, and that has consequences up the spine and into the shoulders, so we don't want that to happen. Now again, we're going to use that same slow process, up for 2, breathe in, lift the leg, and then come down to a count of 4 slowly, and see if you can keep the glute contracted the entire time on that hemisphere. Try not to rest at the bottom either, keep it under contraction, and then pop it back up. Now if you do it right, you're going to feel a serious core workout, you're going to feel a serious glute contraction. You might feel it again in the shoulder over here. That's often a limiting factor because of the serratus. So if you feel anything break down, like the shoulder starts to shrug, hip starts to rotate out, or again, you start to feel it in your lower back, it's a good indication you should stop and reduce it. So we want, again, 2 sets of 20 repetitions with a minute of time in between. If you have any questions on any of these specifics, again, reach out, admin@fluidhealthandfitness.com. Let's get to the next set. Our final segment is strength. Here's where we're going to show you how to specifically target the underdeveloped muscles, try to overload them so that we can create a hypertrophic or a growth response for the muscle, and that's going to change their relative stiffness or make them stiffer. The stiffness of that muscle helps to maintain the joint symmetry that allows us to reduce the overuse of the quads, and this is specifically going to be targeting the glutes. We're going to be doing this with a single leg hip press from a laying supine position. Let's get going. This last movement is going to be, again, an engagement of the glute on the left side. Now again, what opposes the quadriceps as being the dominant player in this is the glute. So remember, every muscle that flexes has a muscle that opposes it, that stretches it on the different side of the joint or on the opposite side of the joint. In this case, we're going to be going through the hip, pushing the pelvis up while stretching through the quadricep muscles. These work in tandem to help you walk, and again, help you to do all these everyday activities. So if this is overused, we never use the glutes, and unfortunately that leads to a lack of stability for both the femur and the lower back. So what Ryan's gonna do is he's gonna keep his knees inside of his hip line. He's gonna make sure that his toe isn't externally rotated out on the left side. So you want the middle of your ankle to track with your second toe, or roughly your heel right in line with your second toe. And then he's going to start off by getting his body stable through his trunk and his pelvis. That can happen by pushing down through the right palm, engaging the lat on his right side. And then he's going to pre-contract the glute on the left. By doing that, you'll see that his hip bone again comes up to the center of the body, adducts towards the center. Again, relax it for a second. You'll see it dump down, flex it, brings it in. It's going to hold the pelvis position so that the glide of the femur is even in the socket. And then again, he's gonna get that rib down, hold the rib down on the same side, so again, he doesn't expose and open up through the oblique. So he's got all these tension lines now engaged to give him an efficient platform to leverage his glute from. Now he's gonna push his hip up off the table, breathing in, and as he does that, he's pushing his weight down into his heel and almost pushing his foot away like he's trying to extend the knee. Not really, because we're trying to reduce this quad, but it's gonna help him to keep his hip line neutral. Now again, the pelvis should be in line so that the ASIS on both sides of the pelvis should be equal to each other. If it weren't, his hip would dump and the knee would rotate open. So you see that a lot. That's the common compensation pattern. You start to see excessive rotation, opening up through the ribs, again, an expansion of the external oblique and a reduction of the gluteal contraction. So we want to make sure that we reduce that. So if you push up so hard or so high that this hip flexor is so tight that it cranks the pelvis over, well then we start doing what? Hyperextension of the lower back, and again a misalignment of the knee and the tracking of the femur in the acetabulum of the pelvis, all of which is going to create some pain cycles in those areas. So don't do that. Keep the knee in, make sure again, lock the rib down, internal and inferior pressure on the left hemisphere, posterior inferior pressure on the right hemisphere with the lat, push down through the heel, push the butt up off the table, keep the hip line neutral, come up for 2, and then breathe out and slowly come down. 4, 3, 2, 1, pause at the bottom, wait for the contraction, and then come back up. So you'll notice if you do that, you're gonna keep the hips off the table and hovering the entire time. We wanna put about 2 minutes of tension on these glutes to fully fatigue them without distortion or movement in the areas that we discussed. Okay, good job, Ryan. So if you see that, if you see your ribs open up, you see your hip rotate out, you see your knees start to buckle away or the foot rotate out, these are all common cues that you're gonna need to pay attention to and reduce. And if you continue to do the movement on top of those compensations, well, that's gonna cement them into your nervous system and into your fascial relationships, which are really gonna make this ineffective. So do what works for you within the range of time and intensity and the range of motion that maintains all these perfect symmetries. And if you do that over the course of time, you're gonna start noticing that the quads stop being the dominant player, the glute starts taking up its own work, it's not taking a siesta, it's starting to work more, and then you should start seeing better movement quality across the board. So remember, 2 times, 20 repetitions, a minute at a time in between, or work up to it over the course of time. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Design to Move. We hope you enjoyed the content. Remember, all of us experience in some way quad dominance. Gravity pulls our body into compression in certain areas, and it normally facilitates the overuse of our quadricep muscles. By applying the techniques, you should start to see a natural leveling out of your pelvis, and again, help to reduce the asymmetries through your whole body, including your mid-back, spine, ribs, and neck. If you have questions on anything that we went over today, make sure to reach out to us at admin@fluidhealthandfitness.com. And as this is just one movement distortion, and there are several throughout the body, if you have specifics on your own body's limitations, make sure to again schedule a free virtual assessment at admin@fluidhealthandfitness.com. We appreciate you joining us one more time. Remember, your body's designed to move, so stay in motion, and we'll see you next week for another episode.